that he was asked by a man, can a woman receive, or should a woman receive her husband at the door and take his coat, take his groceries from him, take whatever he's carrying, help him out at the door? And Imam Malik rahimahullah said, yes, that would be noble, that would be very gracious and kind. Notice also, if we want to notice, it's really important to highlight, he didn't say, yes, it is her duty to do so. He said it would be generous and kind. So it's important. These are not just cultural narratives. These are men, imams who established the law that we follow, that codified the law. The Prophet, peace be upon him, established the law. These blessed men codified the law, synthesized the law for us. May God be pleased with them. So Imam Malik is very specific. He didn't say, yes, of course, she must do this. This is her duty to run and stand and be at his beck and call. And he said it would be generous and gracious. It would be nice. And so the man, of course, thought maybe he's on a roll or something. I don't know. So she can stand while he eats? And Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, ذَلِكَ فِعْلُ الْجَبَابِرَةِ. These are the deeds of tyrants and despots. Immediately, it's not, oh, yes, that would be nice too. No. This is the deed of tyrants and despots. And by the way, he carried on. Imam Malik said, we were honored to narrate on the authority of our beloved, peace be upon him. Remember, Imam Tirmidhi hasn't come yet. Those among men who like for others to stand up for them must beware of the hellfire. Remember that hadith? Of course, in modern hadith collections, this is in Jami' al-Tirmidhi, who passed away 279, almost a century after Imam Malik, rahimahullah. But Imam Malik just narrated directly that on the authority of our beloved, peace be upon him, that there is a brand of men who are cautioned from hellfire because of their arrogance and despotism, that those are the kind of men who like for people to stand up for them when they enter. And so that's how Imam Malik rahimahullah synthesized. There was pristine clarity among the blessed early jurists of felicitous memory about what is the ethic and the spirit of the beloved's law, peace be upon him. The last point that I wanted to pause at was how laws do not change men, and do not change the ethnic character of a people and so forth. Following the relation of the various rulings and codifications, I wanted to make a parallel with Mr. Mill and Mary Wollstonecraft's treatises on freedom and the vindication of the rights of women, so that we understand that laws cannot change universal realities and stubbornly ingrained anthropological traits, and that the major drawback, or the major contention, if you will, with their treatises is that they emphasized or sought the amelioration of the condition of women by emphasizing laws to do this, and why that's insufficient. The major heading that we're talking about is the notion of chastity, the notion of modesty and chastity, and how it is essentially sensual energy, and that ultimately means that the practice of modesty and chastity prior to marriage enables the person to be more sensual when they are decreed to be married, if God had decreed for them to be married, of course. So it's important to highlight this so that the discussion of chastity or modesty is not limited to the female, and to emphasize that these are mutual ideals covering overwhelming presence of ego, and the overemphasis, rather, on ego in our modern life takes away from our children the ability to experience feeling, and hence to regard feeling as a handicap, because the children are going to look at what the adults value in this life and try to emulate that model. So that's the first major obstacle to their emotional growth as soulful beings. The second is much more serious. By emphasizing not so much overachievement, which is not a terrible thing, but by overemphasizing a culture of irony and critique, you build a culture that essentially lives on a rhetoric of argument. So that when you see this, for example, is evident in the overemphasis on comedy in Western culture. The preponderance of comedy shows where everything is made fun of. There is an emphasis on an ironic and cynical distance from life, which I think is important to highlight right after the notion of looking at earthly reality and trying to create a physical representation of it. Now you have in the modern world, after a particular discourse gives up on philosophy, gives up on God, gives up on religion, quote unquote, there's only one option remaining, and that is to deny itself the capacity to feel by keeping a perpetual, ironic, cynical, and doubtful distance from everything in the world. From a Western perspective, this is entirely understandable because of the anthropological, cultural, societal, historical experience. The journey that they had gone through is an absolutely tumultuous one and very painful one. However, as 𝘎𝘖𝘊𝘐𝘓𝑗 عَلَى النَّاسِ, as people who care, as mediators, as facilitators, as carriers of tranquility, we must highlight an honest mirror to our society and our world and say that the imposition, the continual imposition on a rhetoric of a lack of feeling and ironic and cynical distance from the world actually brings up children to mock and ridicule and critique things that they don't understand the power of. Particularly if you teach them, since they're accustomed to cartoons or raised on Sesame Street or anything else, where there is, Sesame Street is renowned, for example, for parodying classical fairy tales. Now, this is hilarious for the adult, but absolutely incomprehensible for the child. If you make a parody of, I'm not promoting Cinderella, for example, or the Three Little Pigs or anything like this, but when you parody them, they represent a particular folkloric narrative, Western as it may be, but making a parody of a folkloric narrative puts the seed for some level of irreverence towards anything folkloric, anything traditional, anything cultured, and hence does not enable the person to learn real critique that is based on conviction, that even maybe intellectual rebellion even is laudatory and honorable and a great virtue to teach young people, so that they engage with the world in a way where they can offer something intelligible. But if you teach them to critique things they cannot possibly understand, you promote a level of dangerous irreverence, and that's what we call ironic and cynical distance. And in a way, as many a sociologist have codified before, irreverence is dangerous because where the words of an irreverent intellectual end, the work of the fanatic begins. Irreverence can